Just to put the change orders in context a little bit, you know, the bidders submit their proposals based on a set of assumptions that we provide to them. And so things are always going to change to some degree. And they can, those changes, and this is not unique, any of my colleagues here at the other agencies could tell you the same experiences. You know, change orders, I think, become a four-letter word almost, but a change order, you know, if you're remodeling your house, could be as simple as moving a light switch from here to there. I mean, we deal with those types of things. We also can deal with things, you know, differing site conditions. If no one knew that something was underground or the ground composition was different than what was anticipated, that can become a change order. To date, we've had a total of about $18 million of change orders paid, all of them within the scope and the dollars within the contingency, meaning we had identified these as risks that we knew and we had set aside budget for these. Altogether for the Phase 1 program, we have almost $11 billion of contingency built into the estimate. And so specifically to deal with the things that we cannot and the contractors cannot foresee at the start of work. So,
and that's part of the original estimates.
And that is part of the, so when you see the $64 billion estimate, 11 billion of that is contingency.
So I'd love to understand how you set that number, and then also your reserve numbers. I was looking in the booklet that the reserve is something like 167 million, which is for this piece. Okay, which still seems like a pretty small percentage of the total.
Well, so we have adopted a pretty state-of-the-art process for setting contingency, and it's to take a risk-based approach. If you look at standard process at many agencies, and it's true of other state projects, there's simply a flat percentage that's attached, a 5 or 10% contingency attached to a contract. And that then becomes the amount you can manage to address unforeseen issues. We actually go in and do a very detailed analysis of what the specific risks might be and then quantify those and develop then an estimate based on that. And so for our first few contracts, when you then back it up to a percentage, it's not derived as a percentage, but they've ended up between roughly 14 and 16% of budget being carried in contingency for the first three contracts. But it's based on an assessment of specific risks to each of those contracts, and we work then. Part of the value of that is not just identifying then what those risks are, but then managing them. And so if we know, for instance, right-of-way is an issue that could potentially subject us to claims, that's then where we put significant management effort to make sure that we avoid those issues. And so we identify the risk, and then we work as hard as we can to manage it to avoid paying it, but we've set a contingency level to cover that amount of exposure.
And we should clarify that 167 is against what, about a $900 million, $940 million.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I didn't understand that. Okay, so I guess my final question is a big picture question, and being curious to hear anyone's answer to this. But you know, this is the kind of favorite punching bag out there in the public these days. How would you respond to a constituent, you know, question at an event, you know, who's been reading all of this bad press, who perhaps voted for the bond measure years back and liked the idea, but feels as though this is kind of turned into a big morass? I mean, how do we, you know, particularly people in Southern California now who see this now focused on Northern California, at least in the short or medium term. I mean, how would you talk to someone who's grown increasingly skeptical in the public about the chances of this being built? We've got the lieutenant governor talking down the project, who may very well be governor next. How do we talk to our constituents about this?
Well, I get asked this question a lot, as you would imagine, and I would say three things. The first thing is that I ask people to step back and remember that this isn't a static situation. This is not a situation where it's a choice between building high-speed rail or doing nothing. That we do have a state that's growing, that we are going to have 50 million people, that we are going to have to make infrastructure investments that are also going to be sustainable in terms of our ability to do this, and that that when you look at the cost of doing other things to maintain equivalent levels of mobility, they are 2 to 3 times higher than what we're talking about here. It's 4,300 lane miles of freeways, it's new airport complexes, runway complexes, 116 gates, et cetera. So I first ask people to step back and realize that this is about what kind of investments we're making in the future, not whether we make those investments. We have to make some investments in the future. The second thing I tell people is that this is really hard, and that everything we've done in California has been hard. The State Water Project, which has been a tremendous boon to our state, passed this legislature by 1 vote. When it did, Governor Pat Brown said, now we're truly one California. The BART system I worked on passed by 1 vote. The Master Plan for Higher Education passed by 1 vote. We passed by 1 vote. We join a long list of initiatives in this state that were controversial and difficult for people to imagine in advance how important they would be. And I ask people to realize that this is really hard and we can do it. And what we're saying in this draft business plan is we're now seeing how we can get the first very important step done, and we can do this. And so to a certain extent, it is a matter of faith. But when we look back at these things that we've done in California, nobody wishes that we hadn't done them.
Thank you for those answers. Where do you, this data about the the airport costs, can you break that down a little bit more? Because that's something that I haven't heard as much. And one of the things that people often say is, there's plenty of decent airline infrastructure. My problem's not being able to get from LA Airport to San Francisco in 2 hours. My problem is getting from LA Airport to Dodger Stadium in 2 hours. I'd love to get a better sense about your vision of the future challenges of the airline industry as it relates to north-south travel.
In the interest of time, maybe I can provide some of this information to you offhand, but let me just say, we've got one of the most congested corridors in the country here between LA and San Francisco. 40% of the flights are delayed. And maybe the quickest thing I can say to you is one of the biggest advocates for high-speed rail in California is the director of the San Francisco airport. Because like Europe, they want to see a mode shift to trains for shorter intercity travel and use their limited airport gates for transoceanic and transcontinental travel. And we see that at other airports around as well. That has been the experience in the Northeast corridor with Amtrak over the years taking now 80% of what it has been that air corridor. You can't get a train from Paris to Belgium to Brussels. You can't get a plane. You take a train. So they want to see this shift, and we think ultimately that's where a lot of the benefit will be. But in the interest of time, I'd be happy to supplement that with some specific information for your office.
I appreciate that.
Okay, we have Senator Huff and Senator Bates, excuse me. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've already submitted a letter to the High-Speed Rail Authority, so I'll try to stick to some other things that have come up in today's testimony. Mr. Richards acknowledged this plan is different than it was 2 years ago, and I think we all recognize what we're looking at is different than it was envisioned in 2008. The LAO has said the business plan lacks a complete funding plan for the remainder of phase 1, and that certainly is of concern. And I'm just making a few comments so we can then get to some questions. And it's possible we're building a segment not likely to have standalone value if we can't figure out the funding. So that sets me up to something you also said, that there are constraints. You're working within the difficult constraints of the money that is allocated, whether it's 50% match for the state bond, a timeline from the feds, looking for more funding into Bakersfield. So having said that, it is fiscally restrained. Can we spend the federal money? We have $2.6 billion of the $3.5 that are stimulus money supposed to be spent by September of 17. So are we on track, no pun intended, to spend that money?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you're looking for additional funding, and that's part of your plan to extend, I guess it's sort of an ancillary part, to extend into Bakersfield where you recognize you'd have more utility if we could get into where the population center actually is, and you have the infrastructure for the passengers and other transit and all of that stuff. So how likely do you think, given the nature of Congress, that we will actually have a successful plea for more funds?
Obviously, that's challenging, Senator. I mean, I would not insult your intelligence by suggesting otherwise. But I would also say that I think we're in a position to have a different conversation with the Congress than we have in the past, particularly if these other things are moving forward and they're seeing private sector interest, which we do see blossoming on this. So I guess I would say we're not embarrassed to have this conversation. And the one thing that, if I might, sir, just respectfully, we wouldn't agree that there is no independent utility for this segment that we're building. We think that it can operate without a subsidy. It will serve, and this is an answer I should have given to Senator Nielsen, one of the reasons for the longer track down to Shafter is that does help serve as the test track. We do need to test these trains at up to 250 miles an hour. We need a long alignment to do that. And we do believe that the connection between Silicon Valley and Central Valley will be very important.
Ever heard that test track many times? That was part of the federal funding requirement, that it reached the speeds of high-speed rail or whatever for their funding?
I think it's more an engineering thing, sir. Prop 1A said that we have to show that the trains can operate at sustained speeds of 200 miles an hour. To show that they can do that, we actually test them at much higher speeds than that.
Because one of the concerns I've always had that hasn't changed is that the population centers are where we have the infrastructure needs, and it would make some sense, as in every other place on the planet that builds high-speed rail, starts with the cities and then connects the ones that have the population centers, and we seem to be starting in the middle of where we can flex the muscles of and let it run, but without actually having the capacity to carry people from point A to point B as we're running at 220 miles per hour. So that's still a concern of mine. We make some robust assumptions on cap and trade that we've talked about quite a bit here. So maybe the legislature needs to take action, as has been suggested by Barclay Bank or the peer review or the legislative analyst. That's a tough row to hoe, you know, using my farm metaphor growing up and hoeing some rows of cotton and other things. I'm sitting next to, although she's absent right now, somebody that doesn't think taking cap and trade money is serving a utilitarian purpose or actually reducing greenhouse gas, particularly not for some years. And so she could come to the same conclusion I would for totally different reasons. But first of all, I didn't like taking the cap and trade money, but now that it's there, I'm questioning whether it's our greatest need for infrastructure when there's other ways to reduce greenhouse gases. I just say that by way of articulating or trying to that it may be problematic to get consensus on using greenhouse gas reduction money, the cap and trade funds, past 2020. So what is Plan B?
As I think I answered before, if the cap...
I apologize, I probably missed it amongst everything.
No, it's a fair question, so it can be asked twice. And that is that if we go back to Chairman Bell's point, which is that we need to be looking at, you know, broader funding opportunities here, whether it's things like the new Federal Transportation Act or whatever. If the cap and trade money is deemed to end at 2020, because I do think, and I'm not an expert on this, that there are arguments that it continues beyond that, but if it's deemed to end at 2020, then we'll be where we've been, which is building segment by segment with available funds as they become available. It will take us longer. It will not be as efficient. It will ultimately cost more. Those things are all true, Senator, and the last thing I would do is try to pretend otherwise.
I'm trying to anticipate where this matching money would come from for the rest of our bonds, but I guess just say for the sake of discussion, when we bought off on the $9.95 billion of funds and it was supposed to be 50% match, I don't think anybody contemplated, but we would be paying, taxpayers would be paying yet another resource called cap and trade that would be coming in to backfill what was not supportable on its own through our good intentions and what we thought was stricter wording in the bond issue, but that's just sort of an aside. So part of the problem we were running, as I understand, with the initial operating segment running from Central Valley to LA Basin was you have this tremendous cost, both in finances and the social costs of where this thing is going to daylight, the tunneling and where it comes out up in, the San Fernando Valley and, whether it's along Santa Clarita as well. But someone made testimony, and I think it was you, that there are some tunneling experts that think we've overstated the tunneling costs. Are they credible? And if so, what kind of range are we talking about? Are we talking de minimis? Are we talking significant?
We have some people on our team, Senator, who have been involved in construction of high-speed rail tunnels in Europe, Spanish companies, et cetera, who, and other infrastructure companies. I've heard from 2 or 3 of those now that they believe that with modern tunneling techniques, actually the costs are significantly lower than what we expect, in the couple of $1 billion range. Beyond that, I'm at the edge of my technical expertise, but I have heard that from people who I would describe by virtue of their experience as credible experts.
And would they have any capital to back up those recommendations that they could do it cheaper?
Well,
So what kind of tunnel you're building?
If this infrastructure development in our country were done the right way, there would be programs that would essentially find ways to encourage this kind of public-private partnership. And, Senator, I don't know where the next dollars are going to come from, but in all respects, sir, I would say in 2008, none of these other sources that are matched were in existence. There was no federal stimulus money. There was no cap and trade money. There was no federal FAST Act money. These things do tend to blossom from other places, and yet we moved forward in 2008. There are a lot of great possibilities here. I think Mr. Thompson said something before that was very important about commitment. Part of the difficulty is that if we can get over the hump and people can find ways to make this work together, we can absolutely make it work, and we can make it work faster and cheaper by necessity, both in terms of the way that the act was originally built and just by circumstance. We're doing it piecemeal. That's always going to be more difficult. But we still are very optimistic that this is something that can be achieved.
Well, back in 2008, we thought it would be under $50 billion. We thought that there would be outside investment that come in, so this indeed would be the only public investment in it. And we thought it would go from San Diego to Sacramento, and we have a totally different animal starting different places. And while there are still vestiges of the original plan, it's a different plan. And having said that, because of all the things you've said, and I don't begrudge you, you've got a tough job coming in, and there are real fiscal constraints with how you do it in pieces. It would be a lot better if we could just program it from point A to point B and, go out to bid and find the money and get the thing done. But that's not what we're faced with. We do have some real life concerns that have been raised here today. So I guess the final, it's more of a statement than anything else, but perhaps this is time to repackage this up with what we know now, which is 6-8 years later, different than what we knew back in 2008, and take it back to the voters and release some of those constraints that we find ourselves burdened with, and see if they still agree with the vision. Bold leadership is a fine thing, but every now and then you got to look around behind you and make sure people are following. In this particular situation, I think last year the governor did a good job of articulating a $58-59 billion infrastructure needs just in our existing state highways. We know we got crumbling water infrastructure and needs more. When we look at our existing stuff, it becomes, if I use my limited resources, and I think we can all agree that resources are limited, although we could have more, we could have less, but they're limited. If we spend it for A, it's a decision not to spend it for B. Is this still our highest priority given what we know now that we didn't perhaps know in 2008? But I would just submit that perhaps it would be easier for you to construct this if we got the green light and took away some of the more problematic things that we're finding with the funding mechanism for this. It's more rhetorical. We can talk later about that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And I think we're ready for public comment. How many people would like to speak? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, can you come forward, please? I'll excuse the panel. Thank you for spending all the time on the rigorous questions. We'll hear from the public.
Chairman. Thank you.
And we'll stay here as long as we need to. So, yes, sir, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. My name is Pat Hume. I am a council member in the city of Elk Grove, second largest city in the Sacramento region. I also serve on the board of directors of Sacramento Regional Transit, the Sacramento Transportation Authority, and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which oversees the operations of the San Joaquin's passenger rail corridor and the Altamont Commuter Express passenger rail corridor. In listening to the presentation by Mr. Richard and Mr. Morales, it's almost compelling to make me want to change my testimony, but not quite. I appreciate that they are under a Herculean task to deliver something under constraints that were just brought up by the senator that are limiting. However, as was mentioned by Senator Galgiani, I think this is developing into a train to nowhere. And with all due respect to Chair Bell, I'll say why that is, and with respect to the northern terminus, is that where it's proposed to end does not connect it with existing passenger rail and transit hub operations. And so anybody continuing on from its northern terminus would have to find other accommodations in order to get to the existing transit network. And then to the south, as was mentioned, I think the rationalization to go to Shafter has been explained, but unfortunately the true sacrificial lamb in all of this is the northern Central Valley, the San Joaquin Valley and Sacramento community, because that blended approach that was mentioned does not connect existing passenger rail operations both in Stockton, East Bay, and Sacramento. And so I would ask that this body ask the High-Speed Rail Authority to rethink funding priorities and do something to the Northern California region commensurate to what they're doing to the Southern California region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Ted Hart. I am speaking to you as a member of the public, but also I have monitored this project for the past 6 years, attending almost every authority board meeting and all of the hearings. And so I have at least from a public point of view, a pretty thorough working knowledge of what this is all about. I addressed the authority board last month, and my question of them was, and concern, is there's not one word in this draft of 2016 on how to provide for safety of the passengers from a terrorist attack. Now, this is what we're looking at today. You know, I listened to all of the conversation about what we're going to do here and there, but it's inconceivable that this would not have come up at one of the board meetings or in their planning discussions. Or did they choose to ignore it because they know there's no known way to prevent it? Brussels confirms the transportation is the jihadist target. It's just, that's where we are. We've listened to things, how it's changed from 2008. I could quote chapter and verse from 2008 in Prop 1A. So all of these things have changed. But would you ride on a train that has 800 miles of exposed track that has no way for some sort of protection against this? Or would you just get in your car and go? And that's the big question. I would suggest to the board that no further funding be provided for this project until the authority can come up with a definitive plan to tell you how are they going to protect against this. There were comments made today about, well, we'll just get on one train and get off on another and all of it. None of this is going to happen. You will have to have the same security that you have at the airlines right now. And you have all of this open idea that somehow you're just going to get on this convenient, like getting on a streetcar. That's not the way it's going to be. And so please take at least some instruction to the authority that they've got to come up with a definitive plan on how they're going to do this. It's not even on their radar. So anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for holding this meeting today. My name is Erica Patterson, and I'm speaking on behalf of Jobs to Move America. a national organization with a broad-based coalition of community, faith, labor, academic, and environmental groups. Our coalition unites around the common belief that our public transportation investments should not just go towards expanding our transit systems and buying high-quality vehicles, but can go a step further by also supporting the creation of good U.S. jobs, training and apprenticeship opportunities, as well as opportunities for people facing barriers to employment. And I'm here today to express support from Jobs to Move America for the California High-Speed Rail Business Plan. Our coalition is hopeful that bringing high-speed rail to California will be mutually beneficial for transit riders, the environment, and our economy. We expect a California high-speed rail system will improve mobility up and down the state, significantly reduce carbon emissions, and employ thousands of Californians in the construction of the line, building of the vehicles, and operation of the system. So we urge the legislature to ensure that the jobs to build high-speed rail train sets will be family-supporting jobs with robust training programs. Thank you for your time and leadership on bringing Californians a more efficient and safe way to travel.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Keith Dunn here on behalf of the Association for California High-Speed Trains. We appreciate the opportunity for the authority to come before you and talk about their business plan. We agree that it's a shift that was needed and is likely to deliver the program faster and more efficiently with the resources we currently have. Just as a matter, our association represents the men and women who are building the system currently up and down the valley, putting Californians to work. It's a modernization program. It does take a long time to get the system built, but it is taking place, and we'd encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunity to get down to Fresno in that area and see what's going on. We're making real progress, maybe not as fast as some of us would like, but it is progress. We're going to build this, and we look forward to continuing to work with the legislature and other bodies to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. I'd like to thank you for this hearing, this oversight hearing. Your counterpart in the Assembly did one last week. We feel like these oversight hearings are productive and important. This is a very big project. We're very big supporters of the project, obviously, but welcome the oversight that your committee gives it, the Senate and the Assembly budget subcommittees give it, and the other oversight hearings that have happened. That's a long way of saying this project is being looked at from all kinds of angles, and the High-Speed Rail Authority understands this. I think they're operating in a way and in a manner that understands this. This project's going to have plenty of oversight. We think it's very important. Finally, I'd like to say I'd like to invite all of you down to take the same trip that your counterpart in the Assembly took, Mr. Frazier, to see the beginning of the construction. This is just the beginning of what's going to be thousands of construction jobs in this project, and it's happening, and it's real. The authority is doing their very best to make as many miles as possible with the money they have. And we think it's a good plan, a plan that's going to connect these two valleys, connect one area of the state where housing prices are affordable with another area of the state where jobs are plentiful. It's a very good idea. We're very happy to support it today, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Sir, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Beal and members. My name is Ron Jones. I'm president of the Train Riders Association of California. I want to thank you for having this hearing today, and I was particularly interested and pleased to hear all the work being done in San Francisco and Los Angeles for the people there. But first, I want to go into what was talked about in Los Angeles. In all your packets, you received a program from Susan McAdams, a TRAC board member, detailing problems associated with the high-speed rail south of Bakersfield. And even though the new plan delays dealing with problems in traversing those mountains, stated in that report, issues such as centering the entire southern system around the proposed largest structure in the western United States, the proposed Burbank high-speed rail station, on soil known to have toxic contamination still remain. There are many other issues, and I would hope in the future you do not have to have your constituents tell you about these. Instead, you're able to react on them. I could also mention a question I won't bring up any further than just to ask why the high-speed rail at this late date has not applied to the Proposition 1A funds given its deadlines under the matching funds for federal. But I have a final point that I want to bring up that I think is more important than these. It's been brought up constantly in this hearing today. Concerns your consumers and their choices in this business plan using one contractor, Cambridge Systematics, for the ridership revenue analysis of Monte Carlo, models for risk. There apparently was no interest, nor time to review and place before you actual polls and surveys of current ridership, or what's actually going on there, which most people here were wondering about today. Well, I live in Fresno. So in closing, let me give you a few statistics, and I'll try to be brief. The average price of a ticket in this model is from San Jose to Shafter is $62, $55 in the new San Francisco-LA connection. For an average computer, I have computers on the mind today, commuter, I'm using 245 days out of the year at $62 per trip to compute a cost of $15,190 or $1,265 a month. The average price of a 3-bedroom home in Sacramento and Stockton is about $192,000 to $236,000, which happens to be the same as it is there in Fresno, according to Trula surveys. Rents are between $1,100 and $1,300. The commute time is 1 to 1.5 hours from Stockton and Sacramento right now today. And respectively, those existing fares on existing is $20 to $29. Who's going to ride a computer train from Fresno to San Francisco and pay nearly $800 to $660 per month more if they want a JPA ride and live in Sacramento and Stockton, respectively? Not underserved people, not the people we're concerned about, and certainly not well-educated tech people. I've lived in Fresno all my life. The Fresno International Airport struggles to get flights. Why? Because those people, those constituents can't afford it. You're trying to force an area to grow where you're going to lose hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water, have one of the worst air quality issues in the country, and now we'll have to pay in our taxes for systems who commuters will likely not use, but rather move their families to other places where their budgets demand. Those families demand. This system cannot meet those ridership without those commuters. This is not a commuter train, according to this report, in my opinion, and thus it lacks a huge assumption that everybody has been making today, and I think nearly every speaker did. And I think that's something that should be considered. That's your job, and it's the job of the state to ensure that a great rail plan for state California is existing, not just high-speed rail. We really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. David River with the San Joaquin Council of Governments. I want to thank you for holding this important oversight hearing. And I also want to thank you for paying close attention to this big change in the high-speed rail business plan. In 2012 and 2014, the high-speed rail business plan put a great emphasis on the blended services between San Jose and San Francisco and Palmdale down to Anaheim, and also from Merced to Sacramento. And we are greatly concerned about the omission of this blended service between Merced and Sacramento in the current business plan as presented in the draft to you. The existing transit corridors between Stockton and San Jose and from Stockton and Sacramento have high levels of ridership. And we feel that the new alignment of high-speed rail between Fresno and San Jose will not serve these needs very well. In 2012, the legislature approved SB 1029, which allocated planning funds for the Merced to Sacramento corridor. And to date, these planning funds have not been able to access by the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. We feel that these planning funds are critical for the need to plan for the phase 2 of the high-speed rail service, and that the initial link to Merced, which was a critical part of the high-speed rail phase 1 from the passage of Proposition 1A to up until this current draft business plan, and the fact that it's not included in the phase 1 as presented to you in the draft business plan is a critical missing link, and that the connection to Merced is vital. As mentioned earlier, Merced is intended to be the critical point where ACE and the San Joaquins connect to the high-speed rail, and at this point, these services are not connected. We have expressed in our common letter to the High-Speed Rail Authority that the planning funds necessary for Merced to Sacramento are critical going forward, and that near-term improvements to the San Joaquin and Altamont Express services are needed. In addition, the Capital Corridor service also connects directly to the San Joaquin and ACE services in Sacramento and San Jose, respectively, and we feel that improvements to the San Joaquin's service and the Capital Corridors and ACE are all very critical as high-speed rail moves forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. My name is Anthony Zepeda. I'm here representing the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Our CEO, Mike McKeever, could not make it today. And with respect to the committee's time today, I won't repeat a lot of the comments that we've already heard, but I would like to share that SACOG is concerned with some of the changes proposed in the 2016 business plan, and we share the same concerns that have been provided by many of the speakers today. In particular, my colleague from San Joaquin Council of Governments. We will go ahead and provide a detailed comment letter with specific comments and changes to the High-Speed Rail Authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Be happy to read that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm almost last, so I'm going to be very brief. My name is Marianne Payne, and I'm here representing Alameda County Supervisor Scott Haggerty. He's the president of the Board of Supervisors, but also the chair of the newly formed Altamont Regional Rail Working Group. It's a group comprised of members of both San Joaquin County and Alameda County cities and local governments, and it has a laser-like focus on providing better mobility between the burgeoning economies in the Northern California megaregion of San Joaquin and Alameda County and beyond. I wanted to just speak in support of all efforts within the high-speed rail program to connect to the ACE train, but also to connect to BART in the Tri-Valley. We believe that it'll provide cost-effective and equitable access for the East Bay and the Tri-Valley and beyond to the high-speed rail system. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Frank Oliveira, Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. Since the project's 2012 business plan, 4 years have passed, and the California High-Speed Rail Authority has steadfastly and forcefully proclaimed to the legislature, local governments, and the media, as well as the public, they were building what was referred to as the initial operating section south, Merced to Los Angeles. Quick review of the approved 2012 and 2014 business plans will confirm this. The authority assured the legislature, the media, local governments, and the public that building the IOS South first was both financially and technically possible and absolutely critical to everyone to connect the Central Valley to Los Angeles and bridge the passenger rail gap between northern and southern regions of the state. Based on this premise, the authority justified their actions before the legislature, media, public dozens of times to secure funding through cap and trade and begin the taking of privately owned property. Just a little more than a year ago, the authority orchestrated with much ceremony a by-invitation-only celebration in Fresno, where they declared that the construction of the high-speed rail system began between Merced and LA. Passionate speeches were delivered. The governor and probably some of you were there and applauded as the IOS South was declared to be transformative to the state and the public. So what happened? The governor, you and I were misled. You and everyone else in the room know that the planning of the project is fatally flawed. No matter how much cap and trade money is channeled to this greenhouse gas generating project, will be not enough for the project to survive or be completed. Besides, cap and trade funding is supposed to be used to reduce greenhouse gas by 2020, not create more GHG and pollution for decades to come, as this project will do. The reality is in 2020, you or your replacements will be solicited to extend cap and trade laws indefinitely so that this gross polluter can be funded for decades to come on the assurances by the authority that this will be a green project maybe someday. The draft 2016 business plan relies on you executing this future legislative action that will continue to deprive worthy projects of the needed funding that will actually affect the climate in a positive manner. Without this future legislation, the authority's plan does not work. Project never connects San Jose to that orchard somewhere north of Shafter with any kind of high-speed track or train. The 2016 business plan is based on the outcome of the debate that has not occurred yet and may never happen. Assuming the legislature does propel the future legislation that provides the authority with its 25% or more of cap and trade funding indefinitely, the project still never connects San Francisco to LA Phase 1 because of its lack of financial viability or funding identified in the 2016 business plan. There is no financial plan identified to extend the project from the orchard north of Shafter to reach LA across the mountains that the authority apparently is retreating from. For the past 8 years, Phase 1 has been the project mission. It is also the primary mission reflected in Proposition 1A and AB 3034. The 2016 draft business plan does not provide a realistic path forward to do this because of the fatally flawed planning. It is incomplete. At best, a plan that will only generate half of the critical details, half of the funding. I could go on this, but I'm not going to. Everybody here knows what reality is. This project is fatally flawed. There is no money to complete Phase 1. There is not enough money to really get to San Jose if cap and trade isn't manipulated. Do the right thing. It's time to supervise this project. It needs legislative supervision and intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other speakers? And just as a final comment, as everybody knows, we're statutorily required to have this hearing. It was written into the law to have a hearing on this issue prior to our high-speed rail authority adopting the business plan. We will try to collect comments and opinions of the senators and communicate them with the High-Speed Rail Authority. And I thank them and everybody else for attending this meeting. We will try to pull together the comments and send it to the High-Speed Rail Authority for their consideration as they work through the business plan to try to improve it and modify it. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and we are adjourned.